All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Together We Build Cardiac Catheterization and Diagnostics Virtual Town Hall. This is the third and final week of the Together We Build Town Hall series, where we have the opportunity to discuss 11 program-specific areas of planning for the new Windsor-Essex Acute Care Hospital. So before we begin tonight, let's respectfully acknowledge that the Windsor Regional Hospital occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Niswi, Ishkoden, Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. We acknowledge the land and the surrounding waters for sustaining us, and we are committed to protecting and restoring these lands and waters from environmental degradation. On behalf of the project management team overseeing stage 2 planning for the new hospital, we are pleased to welcome everyone joining us tonight via Zoom webinar. I'm Allison Johnson, Manager of Communications and Community Engagement for the project, and your moderator for tonight. Tonight, you'll have the opportunity to meet some members of the user group designing the cardiac catheterization and diagnostic spaces at the new hospital, to learn about the work that they're doing and ask questions. So to ask a question, you will click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type your question in there. And we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as possible throughout the evening. That will take place at the end of tonight's presentation. But please note the focus of this town hall is stage 2 planning for this department. And this includes items related to the physical structure of the cardiac catheterization rooms and rooms used for things like ECGs, stress testing, pacemaker checks, and other services. It includes the layout of these rooms, what other programs and services are located nearby, design features, and technologies. To maintain the flow and focus of this conversation, we ask that you please ensure your questions are related to the topic. And following tonight's conversation, we also invite you to visit our engagement platform at togetherwebuild.wrh.on.ca to ask further questions, take our surveys, and share your ideas. Right now, I want to introduce you to tonight's panel guests. Everyone, please welcome Karen Riddell. She is Chief Operating Officer, Chief Nursing Executive, and Vice President of Critical Care and Cardiology. Nicole Kriwanek, Director of Critical Care and Cardiology. Colleen Nelson is Director of Diagnostic Imaging. Dr. Ali Baggerly is Director of the Cardiac Cath Lab. We have our patient representative, Barbara Hebert. Robert McEwen is a consultant with Agnew Peckham Healthcare Planning, and he's been working closely with this user group. And Dr. Andrew Petrakis, who is Director of Clinical Services Planning. And we also may be joined tonight by Dr. Ian Mazzetti, who is Chief of Medicine, and he had 2 competing events tonight, but is hoping to join in later. So thanks everyone for being here with us tonight. Before we get into the conversation, I do want to talk for a minute about where we are at in the planning process. The capital planning process for building a new hospital is 5 stages, and we are in stage 2 right now. So if you take a look at this chart that we've prepared for you, you will see that we started functional programming earlier this year. The functional program is a detailed document that describes future services, activity volumes, staffing levels, new technologies, and space requirements. So since the beginning of this year, about 40 user groups representing different programs and services throughout the hospital have been getting together, meeting, and working closely with Agnew Peckham, as well as our patient representatives, to complete this step. As you can see, they're about halfway through this process, and then when they're finished, they'll work with a team of architects and engineers who will use the functional program to create block schematic plans for the building. These are early plans that show how the rooms will be organized throughout the hospital and what other programs and services will be located nearby. And this is both horizontally and vertically. These will be completed by late fall, and a revised cost estimate is also part of stage 2, which you can see is scheduled to take place later this year. So then everything will be submitted to the ministry in the early part of next year, and that takes us to stage 3. In stage 3, we get into more detailed planning and design development, so we're ready to take the project to market. That happens in stage 4 with a detailed process used to select a developer to further this design and complete the project. And the final stage is construction. And if all goes well, we hope to see patients in the new hospital by 2030. So something to look forward to. Again, we're still in the early stages, but it is important to hospital leadership and those at the planning tables that we have this opportunity to check in regularly with all of you, share project highlights, and get your input. So thanks again, everyone, for being here with us tonight. You've probably heard enough from me now. So I want to begin the conversation by turning things over to Dr. Petrakis, who, as a director of clinical services, sits on many of the user groups, attends most of the meetings. And let's start with Dr. Petrakis tonight. And I want to ask you, what services are we talking about when we say cardiac catheterization and diagnostics? And then how does all of this fit into the bigger planning picture?
Great. Thanks, Allison, and good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd just like to say thanks for all the community participants for being here this evening, for providing suggestions and questions for us to consider when we plan the cardiac cath suites and diagnostics. When planning the cardiac cath suites and diagnostics, special consideration has to be given to the new suites and how they be integrated into the new acute care hospital. Critically ill cardiac patients from the emergency department and from the inpatient areas need direct access to the cardiac cath suites via high-speed elevators. Inpatients as well from CCU and ICU need direct adjacent access to the cardiac cath suites. For outpatients, this is a special case as well. Ease of access for patients and their families, welcoming entrance, intuitive wayfinding to the registration area, to the elevators, then up to the prep and recovery areas of the cardiac cath suites is quite important when we do our planning. And we're hoping that through this planning, we provide the best possible care for patients and ease the minds of families when they come to hospital to visit their loved ones. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you, Dr. Petrakis. And we'll go over to Karen Riddell now. And to start things off with the big picture, what are these two groups' visions when it comes to planning services in this area for the new hospital?
Thanks, Allison, and good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. So I'm really pleased to be able to share our vision for diagnostic and interventional cardiac care for our community in relation to the stage of functional planning for the new hospital. So our overarching vision is really to be able to provide modern leading edge care closer to home for the community that we serve. In order to be able to do this, we have to ensure our planning incorporates the required space, ease of access that Dr. Petrakis just spoke about for that cutting edge technology that supports the provision of evidence-based specialized cardiac services, both now and into the future. So the build of this modern hospital with this latest technology is really going to help us ensure not only access to these services, but also help us in recruitment of the best clinicians, both right now and coming into the following years as we build this new hospital. So it's really, really exciting work, and we're really happy to be able to be here tonight to share some of that with you.
Thanks, Karen. And recruitment has been a reoccurring theme throughout these conversations, and it really is exciting to think of what this will offer in terms of helping attract people to this area. Nicole, a question for you. How will the work that your planning group is doing benefit patients, and specifically as it's related to the cardiac cath lab area?
So the design of the new space will be designed with patients and staff in mind. So we're working with both groups. Frontline staff that are working right now in the Cath Lab will be brought in later phases in the project, but right now we have patient reps, as you can see on the panel, that are informing some of the design work that we're doing. So we're really trying to have a patient-centered approach along with thinking about the community growing in the future to service a growing population in Windsor-Essex.
And Dr. Baggerly, in order to do this, what are some of the important considerations that your team has top of mind when meeting to discuss this?
Thank you, Alison, for the question, and thanks everybody for joining the meeting. So as you know, in the Cath Lab, there are a variety of services that we provide to our community. This varies from taking care of our STEMI patients that are basically people who are coming with acute heart attack to the Cath Lab via ambulance on a very urgent basis, and also our patients. There are basically very important part of designing the Cath Lab in terms of the location, the proximity, as Dr. Petrakis mentioned, to the emergency when it comes to providing the care for these patients. Also, if you are taking care of our inpatients, for example, proximity to the CCU, to the cardiac unit or the intensive care unit. So we are being involved, and we are basically keeping this in mind when we are talking about the design of the new cardiac cath lab in the new hospital. Obviously, our goal is to provide the best care possible to our community, and also making sure that our patients have the best experience.
And I have another question for you right now, and it always is patient-driven, all of these conversations, but there's also staff. What are staff and your colleagues looking most forward to in these plans and the new hospital?
Certainly by expanding and having the facility that we are going to have in the new hospital, that would open up the opportunity for us to recruit more clinicians in our group. That would obviously translate to being able to do more complex cases and being able to provide all the cares that our community deserves. And certainly having a cardiac cath lab that is in close proximity, for example, to our CCU and intensive care unit would provide a better transition when it comes to provide that care to our patients as well.
Thank you. And I want to remind all of those participating tonight, we have some great panelists here. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to type them into the Q&A section at the bottom, and we will get to those at the end of tonight's presentation. Right now, I want to go to Colleen Nelson. Colleen, when we talk about the cardiac services, one of the pieces is the cardiac diagnostics. So how will the work the user groups are doing benefit patients coming in for this area of services?
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Allison. This work will help us to combine our two campuses into one, where we'll have one-stop service for our cardiac diagnostics. So the patients will be able to access all of their cardiology needs in one location, which is wonderful, because right now we divide it between the two sites, and sometimes there's a little bit of a difference between that. One of the other major things we're looking into doing is the separation of our inpatient and outpatient waiting rooms. What this allows is right now, an inpatient has to wait in the hallway while they're waiting either for their exams or to go back to their unit. Having these separate waiting rooms will allow them privacy, and it will also allow us to have the waiting rooms closer to the exam locations where the patients will go, which again will help with the wayfinding and the access for our patients, so they don't have to travel all through the hospital to get what they need.
And that is huge. And that's another reoccurring theme with the different programs, and something I think that you might not even think about until you're suddenly in the hospital and in your gown and find yourself walking back and forth for different services throughout the hospital. So thank you. Throughout this planning stage, the user groups are working closely with consultants from Agnew Peckham Healthcare Planning, and they have been part of many of the largest and most recent hospital projects in Ontario and across the country, including Humber River and Niagara South. Robert McEwen has been working closely with this user group, and tonight he has some highlights that he's going to share from the work that they're doing, as well as some trends that his team is seeing in other hospitals across the province. Robert?
Great, thank you, Allison, and good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen here to pull up a brief presentation. Okay, and so this presentation is some of our findings on the cardiac clinics and diagnostics, as well as the cardiac cath labs, and some of the findings from our meetings so far. When it comes to hospital planning, we truly believe as a group that form follows function. So the physical design and configuration of the future hospital has to work for patient care, and it also has to work for staff workflow and processes. We take that fundamental understanding and try to layer over top of it how healthcare is going to change over time. Cardiac cath labs, for example, a minimally invasive procedure that has exploded in utilization over the last 10 or 15 years. So really, really exciting clinical program. We want to combine these two to ultimately plan the ideal future facilities at the New Windsor Essex Acute Care Hospital. Spoken a lot tonight about a stage 2 functional program submission. And on this slide, we really break down some of the key sections of the overall submission to the ministry. So we want to identify the future services that will be located at the new hospital, as well as the Ouellette campus going forward. We describe future flows, the workload, the projected volumes associated with the clinical programs, as well as the staffing required to accommodate those projected workloads. The adjacencies, we've spoken a lot about this tonight. So who else in the hospital do you need to be close to? A key one for cardiac care, specifically the cardiac cath labs, is the emergency department, as noted earlier. Also in the functional program are detailed space lists where we outline all of the functional areas that patients will venture through, that staff will work in, that materials will be delivered to. It is a room by room list of the entire hospital. And for these programs, we would include things like waiting areas, diagnostic rooms, the cardiac cath labs, prep recovery stretchers, et cetera, et cetera. We do want to be future focused, so we're looking at two planning timeframes. What will the hospital look like in 10 years and what will the hospital look like in 20 years? And then ultimately, this is compiled into a report and given to the hospital's future architectural team to start developing high-level, room-by-room block schematic drawings of the proposed facility. A little bit of overlap here from the last slide, but in terms of the functional program overview, the report that I'm working on with the group, we get into the functions, so the future services provided by cardiac clinics, diagnostics, and the cath labs. Some of the key operational processes that'll need to be taken into account in design: staff flow, patient flow, material flow, workload, as I mentioned previously. What are the current and projected visits that need to come through this area in the future? The same for staffing. How many people are employed to provide the service today, and how many do we think we're going to need just to accommodate the projected volumes? Planning and design requirements. These are some of the really technical requirements within the functional program. We've spoken about the adjacencies earlier. We'll go over the organization of zones and pods on the next couple of slides, and the number of rooms required to accommodate the projected volumes. Ultimately, that ends with the space list, which, as I mentioned on the previous slide, is the list of all the functional areas within the program area: the future cardiac cath lab department, the future cardiac clinics department, and the future cardiac diagnostics department for the future hospital. In terms of some of the trends, Colleen just alluded to this, but we, in terms of cardiac diagnostics and cardiac clinics, we want to have a very robust front of house area. And so outer waiting, change area for outpatients, for routine ambulatory patients who are able to come to the hospital and navigate a care department on their own, but also a very strong back of house connection that allows for discrete access for inpatients. A lot of people, when they're admitted in a hospital for an acute care stay, it's not a great time for them. And we want to avoid overlapping these patient populations and having a dignified environment for inpatients. A trend that we're seeing in cardiac cath labs is really having the procedure rooms themselves located around a clean supply core. Really facilitates good inventory management and other clean protocols when it comes to performing procedures. All of these rooms, it goes without saying, will be based on contemporary planning standards. So they'll probably be much bigger than they are today and appropriately sized for future functions. We spend a lot of time thinking about infection prevention and control, especially over the last 2 years that we've undergone. It's always top of mind. And certainly in terms of operational efficiency and flexibility, we need to deliver really good patient care, and we also need to do it in a way that works for staff, and we can maximize our efficiencies and provide the safest care possible. All that leads down into patient and family-centered care, which is really why we're here today and why we're spending so much time on planning the facilities of the future. So as I mentioned, this is just a very high-level diagram on what we might see when we have the cardiac clinics and cardiac diagnostics side by side. We really want to create that robust front of house, more public outpatient area. Outpatients would come in off of public circulation. We would usually see sort of a suite of exam rooms, a suite of imaging rooms. There would be patient care and staffing areas in the middle of each of these pods to reduce staff travel time and maximize the ease of guiding patients to the rooms that they need to go to. And also for the cardiac diagnostics area, which will be responsible for inpatient care, we have this separate sort of back of house entrance concept and inpatient waiting and holding area, again, to create that dignified and care environment so that routine outpatients are not walking past people in stretchers and hallways, and so that we're avoiding quote unquote hallway medicine in the future with our physical design. The last slide here, just as I wrap up, really, again, a high level schematic of what the cardiac cath labs might look like in the future. A prep recovery for patients pre and post procedure, connects via semi-restricted corridor to the cath labs that are situated around a clean supply core. Really getting into some of the nitty gritty here, but there are a lot of benefits in terms of the clean supply core, inventory management, and just IPAC considerations, the cleanliness of procedural supplies. So I think that is all from me, Allison. So I will take my screen down and turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Robert. And right now I want to hear from our patient representative who's been working as part of this user group. Darbara Heber is with us tonight. And Darbara, I want to ask you as a patient rep, obviously bringing an important lens to this conversation. We've heard a lot about that already tonight. What considerations are most important for you when having these discussions and why? Darbara, you're on mute.
Sorry.
No worries.
I think I can sum that up in about 2 words. I want it easy and inconvenient, because to go into a hospital, and one we won't know the layout of, we have to go somewhere. We want to get there safely for sure, but we also want to get there and not be so stressed out. Just getting there, I need someone to help me walk. Maybe I need a wheelchair. I want somebody there to help if I should need it, and to take me to where it is that I need to go. Another thing that's I would find too is that for the minute you walk through the door, you want to feel comfortable. So you want to make sure that you've got a parking spot not too far away maybe. And also when you do get there and travel the hallways, as the fellow before me was saying, you don't want to be walking into a stretcher or different equipment, so different things sitting out in the hallways, which is no place to put them, of course. So you need things like that. Also going through, you want to be able to find out which room you need to go into. So you need someone there definitely to help you. And with cardiac being the situation that it is, it's getting worse, more people, more elderly people. We really do need more help than normal, than someone who's able to walk through and find their own way.
I like what you said there. 2 words. I think we can sum up a lot of the presentations that we've heard over the past 3 weeks into those 2 words, easy and convenient. And it is so important that we have this patient perspective at the table, and the tables, are not that big, but we do want to hear from all the patients out there. And that's why we're holding these town hall sessions. And that's why we do have our website, togetherwebuild.on.ca, where you can share your feedback. So please, if you haven't already, check that out. And I'm going to try something here, because at the beginning I did not introduce you to our other patient rep, but it seems that she may be joining us now. We have Heather Sheriff on the line. Heather, are you there?
Hello, can
Heather,
you hear me?
I can, and you are just on time, because I wanted to ask you while you're here tonight. You've been a part of the user group meetings for this group. How have you found the process?
Well, I was very pleased. It was very enlightening and very comforting. I was really struck by the sincerity of all the participants. There's a very genuine interest in the patient perspective, trying to ensure that everybody's needs are met. And this is being done at a very high level of detail that I was a bit surprised with, but delighted with. The detail of the planning has included first-rate communications, the sharing of information with people like myself and with others, and sincerely listening to the feedback. Actively soliciting input from all of the people in the community. That has been very comforting to me. A lot of times you go through different things in life and you feel that your voice is not being heard at all, but I am very pleased with how this is proceeding.
Thanks, Heather. And I'm glad that you had the opportunity to join us tonight, as well as to participate in this. Well, and I think that also speaks to the way that we've been doing the planning, right? People have had to learn how to meet each other in this online space, and hopefully sometime before the new hospital opens, at least, and maybe before the next stage, we can start to have these conversations in person. But thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to throw this back out there because we are getting close to the end of our presentation for tonight, and we still don't have any questions. And I see there are several people out there. If you have your questions, get them in now. At our last town hall, when we talked about education and learning services, we said it must be that everyone did such a good job at the presentations. And I do agree that that is probably true tonight as well. But while I'm waiting to see if there are any questions, I will give one more plug for our website. That's togetherwebuild.wrh.on.ca. We're asking everyone to share their thoughts about the new hospital, about the cardiac catheterization lab and diagnostics, but also other programs. You can go on there and you can provide input on 10 program and service areas. So we've got emergency services, cancer services, inpatient units, and I'm not even going to tell you all of them because I want you to go on and check them out yourself. And it looks like we still have no questions. So I'll check in with our panelists again to see if there's anything that we missed, anything that was part of this conversation tonight that you would like to add. Let's start with Dr. Baggerly.
Thank you very much, Alison. Again, I can speak from our cardiologist group and interventional cardiology group in the Cath Lab that we are all very excited for the community. As you know, the location of the Cath Lab that we've had in the hospital hasn't been ideal, and the new hospital will give us opportunity to basically implement all the need that we have in the program to advance our care that we provide to our patients. So we are all looking very much forward to this, and there's great excitement in our program, and we're all hoping that we're going to be able to elevate the level of the care that we provide to our patients.
I'd just like to add that I think it's very clear from our patient reps what they require. They require ease of access. They require a welcoming environment. They need a welcoming place for their families to come with them. They need state-of-the-art equipment and professionals to carry out all the testing that's required for them and carry out the procedures that they need here in town and not to have to leave town.
And we do have a question from one of our participants tonight, Dr. Baggerly. I'll address this one to you. They want to know, are we going to provide EP services in Windsor, which I believe stands for Electrophysiology? They said that they noticed the Cath Lab layout, that it was included in the diagram.
Thank you very much for the question. And I think Karen Riddell can probably expand on my answer, but at this time, I believe there is no plan. Generally speaking, the electrophysiology programs that includes basically implantation of ICD or performing ablation for the arrhythmias, usually they are joined with the cardiac surgery program, and that's usually how those programs are set up in different programs or hospitals around the province that you look. But again, I pass the mic to Karen to answer more.
Great, thanks, Dr. Baggerly. And that is a great question. And it really goes to one of the challenges with the functional planning is we are attempting to ensure that the services that we're building will grow with us into the future. So as cardiac services expand in our community, moving forward, we want to ensure that we have the space to provide additional services. So there are some different structures required for EP services. like this, and Robert can provide a little bit more detail, but it is a bit of a bigger room. So in order to make sure that we can provide that in the future, we are putting it in the functional plan that'll go to the Capital Branch. So we're hopeful that we will be able to provide that service in the future so that less patients have to travel for service. But we can't say for sure at this point until that would need further approval from the ministry.
All right, thanks, Karen. I see we have a comment in here from Pamela. Pamela, thanks for joining us tonight. And she says, thank you for a great meeting. You're covering everything, and I'm pleased to recognize some people I met in the Cath Lab a couple weeks ago when I had my angiogram. Dr. Baggerly was one of them, I think was there. And if this is a sample of what will happen at the new hospital, we Windsorites certainly have a lot to look forward to. And I couldn't agree with that more. So thanks everyone for being here with us tonight. If you haven't already, once again, our engagement site, togetherwebuild.wrh.on.ca, where you can continue this conversation, post your ideas, take our surveys, and ask any questions that you still have, but maybe didn't think of tonight. So this site that I've been talking about all night, this will remain live for 1 month after the town hall. So you can please continue to share your thoughts. And following that, the results will be summarized and shared with our planning teams. So your input will help guide decision-making throughout the process. Please take the time to share your thoughts. Then later this year, we're going to do this all again. You're going to have a chance to see how the planning has progressed and how this input was used in the planning. I want to thank our panel guests for being with us tonight. So fortunate to have you all, not only at the planning table, but also here with us tonight and throughout this process, keeping everyone up to date on the plans for the new hospital and sharing throughout. It is so important. For the final word tonight, I didn't prepare anybody for this. So I will call on Karen to give the final words because she's always good at that.
Sure, no pressure. So first off, I do want to thank everyone for joining us this evening and for the panel. I've been working with the cardiology program for going on 5 years now, and it's always been a privilege. And certainly it's very exciting to be able to plan for such an improvement in our cardiac program. We already have great staff, we have great physicians, and we provide great care, but we are doing that in very aged infrastructure. I'm being polite there. So it's very exciting to be planning a space that is going to be leading edge, cutting edge, and everything that our community deserves moving forward. So thanks again for having us here tonight.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night and join us back here tomorrow where we're talking about the future of diagnostic imaging. Cheers, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.